we've created enough suspense here. So welcome everybody, my name is Alessio, I'm the founder of FoodTech, and I'm really thrilled actually to welcome you to London's first food and food tech innovation hub. We've been here now for about, I guess almost a year. It's approaching actually fast. We did our launch party last July. Feels like, you know, it was 10 years ago. I guess time flies. Yeah, so we're here to tell you a little bit more about what we've been up to. I'm going to give you a quick introduction about what we are doing, I guess, and more information about also the innovation hub we built in partnership with Tree about a year ago. Then we're going to hear actually from our keynote speaker, who's Fung. Chris is a friend. We met actually, I guess, a little more 2 years ago. You know, he knows a little bit about food tech to a point where he's going to share with you a definition of what food tech is all about. We've been actually talking about this for a little over a year now, as there is no definition out there that I guess is universal enough for people to wrap their head around. We wanted actually to, we really wanted him to share with you what he thinks, agri-food tech is all about, and then he's going to share his perspective about also some speculation, I guess, at the future of this sector. But before we get into that, just a quick introduction about what we do at FoodTech. We're the world's first collaborative platform for the food and beverage industry. What that means is fairly simple. We try to connect corporates with established startups to enable collaborations among the two, with a very simple mission, which is fostering food innovation through meaningful collaborations. I've started this business about actually 5 years ago in the States under a different name. It was an investment platform that used to be called crowdfunding. We learned a ton. We failed multiple times in trying to make that model work until we actually got to develop this model, which we've now been running for about 2.5 years under this new brand as FoodTech for a little over a year and a half actually. As I said, we basically believe that corporate executives and entrepreneurs, and I want to stress this as we put human beings at the core of what we do. We think innovation is a collaborative effort, and not because it's a nice way of saying it, but it's really because when you put the right people together in the same room, that's where they can actually make things happen. And we believe that effectively entrepreneurs and corporate executives bring a very complementary skill set to the table. On the one hand, the ability of startups to innovate and coming up with new ideas and quickly validating them, with actually the ability of corporates to scale this proof of concept. So when you put those things together, that's actually how we believe we can contribute to creating a better future of food, or brighter for that matter, by basically putting together the right skill set. How did we done it? How did we do this? Is through a number of activities, including also mapping what actually the innovations landscape looks like. On the CPG side, we now have about 10,000 companies globally that have created innovative products that we actually capture within our databases. On the agri-food tech side is about 3,500 now, which is the number that we share as clean data. Then we have another batch of data we're in the process of cleaning. These are some of our partners, corporates, tech partners, and actually organizations like ours around the world that we partner up with. So on the higher row, you see some of our some of our tech partners of the likes of Google. One thing that we've been doing with Google for about 2.5 years now is actually curating everything that goes into their canteens and cafeterias in terms of food products. So we used to help companies, startups with their fundraising efforts when we realized that actually sales is the only thing that actually matters, even for raising finance down the line. Then we started, working with them to really getting new products into their offices and by helping effectively startups to tap into alternative sales channels. As is a relatively small, I guess, sales channel. They feed 5,000 people every day in London and about another, I think, 10,000 in Ireland. But I think is the right place for most startups we work with to get their products in front of the right audience. Then all the other big brands that you see there are some of our corporate partners and clients. And down here, and I see quite a lot of familiar faces and also new ones. So we have a few of our partners that we partner up with on a number of different things, including also sharing data about their local ecosystem. As we understand that, we could not map everything. So there are things that we can do ourselves, but then again, we live and breathe this collaborative sort of mindset, and we share it with a lot of our partners. As far as the Innovation Hub is concerned, just wanted to give you a quick sort of glimpse of what we do in here. Where you're sitting is actually the event space that Apple Tree kindly allows us to use for running some of our events. But actually on the other side is where we also sit as a team, and where some of the companies within our Innovation Hub also have their residency. And what we do with the Innovation Hub, and the reason why we built it in the first place, was really to create the perfect environment to actually connect some of these large corporates with entrepreneurs that they want to work with. But also is really to support food entrepreneurs through a number of resources that we make available to them, including a sort of an accelerator program that is completely equity free, that we run. Basically, we run monthly workshops that we try to cater to the needs of our resident companies. Then what's in there is basically a shared space that can cater the needs of small startups all the way through a little bit more established companies. So you could start, with a desk, a hot desking, and then as you grow the team, then you can scale effectively your office needs. Then we're in the process of building a little media studio, which is nothing but a set of lighting and a camera that will allow companies to actually create content for everyday social media. And then a retail-facing platform, which is a really exciting project we're currently working on to basically bolster our partnership with Google and open a new retail channel to some of the startups we work with. Then, as I mentioned earlier, we run what we call Tech Bootcamp. So the whole idea and the reason why also we started actually these kind of meetups with Google about 2.5 years ago was really to bring together the foodies and the techies community. As we believe that some of the most exciting, I guess, food tech businesses that we also have seen around the world actually started as foodies and techies got together to solve a specific challenge. So our own ethos when it comes to running this kind of social events like this one is really to get the techies excited about working in food. As we see that tech is not the holy grail of everything, but can really help to solve some of the challenges that our food system is facing right now. So the whole idea to bring techies in food is actually started at Google. About 2.5 years ago, where they were running the ex-Googler pitch event, actually, and we started bringing in the foodies. And we saw that actually quite a lot of tech people could wrap their head around, what the startups, so the food side of things we're doing. And so the whole idea with it is really to bring tech people that can help also food entrepreneurs to understand how they can leverage, for instance, an e-commerce platform or in general online sales channels to really unlock growth for their business, as opposed to relying, let's say, heavily on retailers. But then, as I said, discovery missions and engagement programs for corporates are the other activity that we run over here, where we sometimes deliver trainings and workshops to our corporate customers, but we try always to bring entrepreneurs in so that then we can facilitate, potentially, a partnership among them. And that's really how we then function as a business. The media studio, really quickly, you might have seen also outside as we're walking here, there is a little booth like that one. That is actually a podcast studio as well that can be rented by the hour or by the day. And again, is to bolster and to allow also entrepreneurs to create more content for promoting their business. And last but not least, I'm going to introduce now Chris, who's going to tell you a little bit, I guess, about his journey into the food tech space.
Hi everyone, thanks very much for having me. It's great to see a lot of familiar and friendly faces. For those of you who don't know, let's go which way?
Up and down.
Up. Okay. My background is I'm former CEO of Crush, which has got about 30 odd sites across London. I ran that business for about 13 years, sort of leading the healthy eating, at the forefront of healthy eating and that revolution that's happening now. In the last couple of years, I've been focused very much on food tech, both as an investor, as a non-exec advisor, that sort of thing. So there's a whole range of things that are going on in food tech that's been super exciting. And what's been happening was, so I met Alessio, I think, a year or two ago, was at Johan's Sweden Food Tech event, where we were talking about the future of food tech there. And Alessio and I were on a podcast not long ago, probably about a couple months ago, and one of the questions that was asked of us was, what is food tech? And the question was like, well, actually, Alessio had a concern that there wasn't a universal definition of food tech, whereas I thought, actually, there potentially is one that you could use, because I think it's important to have one because it does two things. And the reason why you want one is the fact that actually, without a definition, it's very hard for us to explain as a sector what it's about. So when it comes to meeting corporates, meeting customers and so on, even the, consumer at the end of the day, without understanding what food tech is, it's actually quite hard to get that message across. If you're an entrepreneur, going to an investor, trying to explain what food tech is, at the moment, is either very, very generic. You have a long, a short thing which basically says everything is around anything that touches food, that is technology, is food tech, or it runs to like 4 slides long and 10 different categories. So we need something that's useful in between that. And part of that discussion was actually to come up with something. So I'll give you a bit of context in terms of why I might have a view. So quick background. I did manufacturing engineering over 20 odd years ago. So background, worked in Kellogg's and Smith's Chips, which is kind of the Walker's equivalent of the UK, back in Australia. Then did industrial design, and very much around product design and how things look, furniture, did everything from glass blowing to jewelry, and then ended up in consulting. And then started the entrepreneurship journey with Crush. Now when I look back, a lot of the stuff that I did 20 odd years ago is actually stuff that is now coming back to the fore. So back then we were looking at 3D printing, we were looking at nanotechnology, looking at sustainability, recyclability. All of that was sort of all the rage back then, except that the technology hadn't sort of been proven out yet. 20 years later, we're now starting to see things actually happening. So part of the context then is, so what is, food tech? There's an old school definition, the stuff that we did 20 odd years ago, which is all around the fact that it's a branch of food science. And it's about actually looking at how food manufacturing processes are about getting it more efficient, cheaper, safer. So it's all around preservation. So if you think about canning, canned foods, Heinz baked beans, things like that. That's what food technology was. A lot of it's around nutrition. How do you make sure that your products are fresh, stay fresh, and so on. So that's obviously a tiny subsector now of what we define in this sort of new world of what food tech might be. So I think I've tried to crack it into one sentence. As I said, that there's quite a lot of other people that have tried to explain it, but in lots of pages and so on. And the way I've described it is any technological innovation that is anywhere along the food value chain that can potentially disrupt the way we produce, consume, and also interact with food. And that technological innovation around the food value chain, I think that's quite a well-known sort of aspect. I think Nadia from YFood was talking a bit about it yesterday. But the part that hopefully is useful is actually breaking into the 3 sectors, about producing and consuming, and then how we interact with. Another way to put it is, I think of it as from, the farm or the lab to the plate to fork, and then fork to thoughts. And it's this last bit that you know, everyone talks about farm to fork, farm to fork. We kind of understand that. But this last part, which is all around this interaction and how we remember the experience and everything moving towards this experience economy, that's where I think there's something to be said. So the way we think about this is that you can actually break pretty much most of the businesses that we're looking at across the sector into these three categories. I'll give you a little bit of an example here. So there's a lot of text there, but I'll highlight a few things. The point here really is that you can actually put pretty much everything along those sort of three categories. The agricultural side, agri-tech, all that sort of sits on the first part. So think about all the things we're talking about in the last few days around sort of clean meat, you know, next-gen food, so plant-based meat, Impossible Burgers. There's something called shop foods. I don't know, anyone heard of shop foods? It's basically prawns that we're doing cellular sort of meat. Things like fitness foods, Eat Grub guys that were at FoodTech Week earlier with the insects. They are, you know, all looking at different ways of it. So the original thing was all around sort of growing crops and so on. Now it's actually about sort of, you know, lab-grown meat. Take other things like urban farming, so the vertical farming, the stuff that is you know, you're growing on the side of a wall, at home, micro farms, EcoBloom, all these different businesses. That's all starting, you know, the way we're looking at really sort of completely rethinking the way we actually produce food. Then there's all these things around sort of CRISPR technology. We've got robotics. So I think Thursday, the guys from Karakuri are going to be talking about how they are going to use robotics to make salads and all sorts of different things. Some really cool stuff. Morley Robotics spoke yesterday. So there's a lot of things about how we go around the way we produce food that is completely different to anything that's gone before. In terms of consuming, think of it as the point at which we're in the kitchen to getting it to your fork, into your mouth. So everything from food delivery is the obvious one there. So everything from, you know, Uber Eats and Deliveroo. But then there's a lot of things around direct-to-consumer. So I think when I look back at sort of the reason why the world is changing, you know, we are in a situation where, for the, I guess, first time in the last few years since the last recession, the retail world, as in the food retail world, has been finally disaggregated by the internet. Up until the last recession, it's only been people like in retail, like the fashion guys, H&V, remember H&V? Music, white goods. They got disaggregated by the internet with online retail, online sales. Food has always been there because you always had to turn up to eat. We were protected. But what's happened now in the last few years is you've got Deliveroo, Uber Eats, and so on. That's changed it. We can effectively email food now. And what's happened is that shift of power has really, really changed. We've gone from being about you know, a retail bricks and mortar business that actually had insight about the customers to a point at which now actually the direct-to-consumer businesses really, really have the data. So people like Mindful Chef, HelloFresh, with all the different recipe boxes and all this, where they can actually see exactly when you're buying, what you're buying, and then actually target you in different ways. Us, you know, bricks and mortar, I was having 60,000 odd customers a week. I got a pretty good sense of what kind of behaviors are happening, what people are buying, how they're thinking about it, but I didn't actually know who my customers were. So there's a big difference between knowing who your customer is and actually just understanding the insight. So if you take a step back to the FMCG guys, so Unilevers, the Diageos, all those large companies where they're spending a lot of money on marketing, but it's going through a grocery retailer, like a Tesco, a Sainsbury's, and so on. They're throwing a lot of money without really understanding the end customer. And D2C is completely disaggregating this. So Graze.com basically got sold for 180 million relatively recently. You know, so if you don't understand what's happening in this sort of food tech world, you're going to end up in a situation of being sort of cut out of the loop. I think I was just recalling that Kraft Heinz back in, in February this year, effectively lost a third of the value. You know, it was, I think, at $15 billion wiped off their market cap overnight because of a write-down on their brands. Because all these direct-to-consumer, all these new world of brands have completely changed the way we look at products. So the consume part also brings in whole range of other things like IoT, smart appliances, bits in there that are red, if you can't see. There's Pasta Evangelist, Mr. Lee's Noodles, one over. These are things that I'm actually directly involved in, either as an investor or as a board advisor. The smart vending one is quite interesting. So I spent a lot of time with Mr. Lee's Noodles, which some of you know about. It is basically a healthy pot noodle, but it's delivered via, well, traditionally through the supermarkets, but also through a smart vending machine. So this different way of interacting with food and how you consume it is really sort of disrupting the way we sort of operate as well. So from a Crush perspective, I look at it and unless Crush and other sort of bricks and mortar businesses are understanding how we play in this new world of getting food to your home or to you as a customer, wherever you are, the game is slightly changing and it's starting to be lost. So it really works across the spectrum. I'll give you an example here. Pasta Evangelists have been going for a couple of years now. They recently got into Harrods Food Hall, the premium end. It's a brand new space that was, I think, back in November last year. When I was running Crush, we looked at places like Selfridges and Harvey Nicks. I know what the numbers are in terms of the rents. They charge an arm and a leg. And we were restricted with what we could do. I was always struggling to make the numbers work. Very interestingly, with Pasta Evangelists, the guys have only been around for literally 18 months or so. And the bricks and mortar sort of side of things was a year 3 plan. But I started chatting with Alessandro, who is effectively the founder of the business. We looked at the lease of the Harrods and thought, you know what, actually, it's possible to make this work. It might not be profitable in the short term, but actually, if you treat it as lead gen, right, you have 6 months of lead gen or something like that, that becomes very, very interesting because all of a sudden, they as a business that is D2C have all sorts of channels. They can do gifting, they can do subscription, they can do letterbox to your home in the Outer Hebrides, wherever. And that opens up things to a very, very different level to just bricks and mortar where you can go in, eat your food, take your drink, and that's it. So that's really, really turning things on its head. So when you look at how we consume this plate to fork, there's a whole lot of things in there that make it quite interesting. We're seeing a lot of different platforms out there, with Ritual, all these, Feeder, all these different sort of food platforms. One of the things that we're looking at, a friend of mine here, we're looking at is an Airbnb of food idea. Now that effectively is a platform idea, but it's also changing the way we think about food and how we consume things. The last part is around interact with. This is the fun part because most definitions sort of deal with the first two parts where I think pretty much most people understand. The last part is interaction. It's very much around moving to these new things I find quite exciting. So taking the 5 senses. I've got Heston and Charles Spence up there. So Heston Blue with our Fat Duck fame. He was doing a lot of stuff with Professor Charles Spence, who's from the University of Oxford, doing things, sort of taking in sort of colors, sounds, and different aspects to change the way you perceive your flavors. So, when you're up in the plane, your taste buds are deadened. How do you change the food to make it sort of more attractive and more sensorily sort of interesting? So taking a lot of that, there's this restaurant in Ibiza where they effectively had a whole room. I think it's the most expensive meal you can have. 4 walls and also the table projecting different types of visuals and so on to encourage you to experience a different way of eating. I'm quite interested in things around the 2 companies there, Ambi and Cheerify, where we're looking at with music within stores and restaurants, how do you actually change the experience of it? Ambi's been pretty interesting because they've been working with London City Airport, and the music that you can put in there, they have it in the airside part of the building. And some of the music that there's been research that they've done, that you can actually put music that encourage, well, if you're a normal person, you treat it as just nice, relaxing music. If you are slightly suspicious or you are a potential terrorist, it makes you feel uncomfortable. So they can sit on the CCTV and actually pick people out that look a little bit suspicious because of the music that's going in the background. And that's pretty scary, but that's the kind of stuff that music can really do. So all this sensory stuff, there's a lot of stuff that we don't actually understand in our own heads. And we're only starting to learn about that now. So there's a bunch of really interesting things. So AR, VR, the whole gaming side of things. I I think some of the things we saw, Google Glass, if you remember Google Glass, they've just announced, I think yesterday, or a couple of days ago, the Google Glass Enterprise version 2 or something, which is a new version of Google Glass that's going to sort of take in mixed reality. I think one of the startups, ChefU, which we talked about yesterday, is effectively something where you put a virtual headset on and you can learn how to cook, and you can effectively use a knife, chop all sorts of things up. We're going to move into more and more of that. So this part is about how do you actually take your experience of food and how does it become your thoughts, your memories, and so on. The part around Fortnite there, that's an interesting one because Fortnite, I think, is, everyone knows that it's a game. I think it was the biggest DJ event. They had a DJ event for I think about 10 million people, something ridiculous like that, inside the game. So if you imagine that you're having these online sort of virtual experiences, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 years ago there was something called Second Life, where you had your own little avatar. Back then the graphics weren't quite so good. Now the virtual reality, all the technology is catching up. So we're going to be not far away from this Black Mirror type sort of scenario where you are completely ensconced in this world of virtual reality without realizing what the real world is like. So that part I think is something that is really, really nascent at the moment, and we're only starting to explore it. And then you add things like the quantified self side of things. That's the part I'm particularly interested in around personalized health and personalized nutrition, where you are dealing with what you eat and so on. It's been longevity, but sort of extending your life. You've got people like Tim Ferriss, Dave Asprey from Bulletproof talking about how they're actually going to live to 120 or 180 in Dave Asprey's case. And with things like wearables like Oura Ring, has anyone heard of the Oura Ring? Yeah, it's a ring that you wear that you can track your sleep with, and your quality of sleep and so on. There's something called Whoop now, which is it helps you measure your heart rate variability without actually a chest strap. It's another sort of thing around your wrist. Start combining these things. We really are becoming sort of data animals ourselves. And then you add that to next-gen food and drinks. This is the part around psychedelics and so on. Nootropics, how do you take products that's going to help you be smarter. And psychedelics, so THC gummy bears, I'm quite interested in the whole area of cannabis and so on for CBD side. But THC, with the psychoactive side of things, there's a lot of stuff in the US where you've got the THC gummy bears. I mean, there's some question marks about the semantics of that for children, which I quite questionable about. But the point being that actually, as you start thinking about taking some of these different sort of products, and there's more research in there, how we deal with thinking about memories and so on really, really changes. And how you experience food is also going to change. You combine that with the tech elements, wow, you've got into something really, really interesting. And we haven't really sort of got into that yet. Now, there's a whole part around there, around entertainment, on the bottom part, entertainment, competitive socializing. That's become a big thing in our sector of F&B. That's where we're talking about junkyard golf, flight club, where you're doing sort of darts and so on, ping pong tables, bounce and so on. That's been around for a long time, but now we're starting to use tech in there. You've got these escape rooms in the US. You've got bingo, where you've got all sorts of technologies sort of doing sort of funny things and sort of video game gamification of all that. That's about to go up another level. Whistle pumps is, has anyone heard of whistle pumps? It's axe throwing in Vauxhall. So you go in there, you pay your whatever, 20 quid, and you have a bunch of friends. Well, you're supposed to not drink, probably not a good idea, but you get axes and you start throwing them at a target. Great fun. But imagine that when you start mixing that with all sorts of other things in the interact with. So there's a lot going on, and I guess what I'm trying to put forward is that you've got a definition that allows us actually to look at things and analyze it. From my perspective, I'm using it very much from, how do I look at investments? How do I look at businesses? Where do I want to play? So why does it matter? Because actually, when we're talking from a sort of a global perspective, FoodTech, literally, this is something exciting that's happening, that's going to happen for the next 20, 50 years. Completely, fundamentally believe this. Effectively, VC investment in the last 5 years has grown by, a CAGR of 50% pretty much. The rest of the global VC sort of growth has been about half that, about 27%. So it's massively over-indexing on food tech. But if you look at the big ones, it's all around sort of, in the US, it's around sort of Deliveroo and so on. Within Europe, we've got about 6.5 billion of European food tech funding. Half of that is in 5 companies. Deliveroo, Just Eat, Takeaway, HelloFresh, Takeaway.com. Of which 2 of those, or 4 of those are 2 basic business models, of which half of them also are not profitable and don't make actually operational sense. Yet we've had a lot of money put into there. So this is stuff from our good friends Ivan and Nicola at 5 Seasons. So you can see we're only scratching the surface, and this is where we say the opportunity is really 99% of everything else. So we've got 1% that we're actually focused on, that the money has been spent on, which is on Deliveroo, Takeaway, Just Eat, and so on. So think about what's going to happen in the next 10, 15 years, next 50 years. That's, everything else hasn't even been touched. And the whole world of the traditional FMCG companies, the Unilevers of the world, even the large Diageos, all that, it's completely changing. So there's a lot of opportunity, and hopefully this gives a sense of what might happen, where we can actually go with this. So I guess I'm going to put the last part of this is just sort of the 3 areas that I'm personally interested in. It covers some of the stuff we talked about, as before, a stray coffee cup. First part is around frictionless hospitality. So in the F&B world, that's my interest. There's a lot of tech that's going on, from EPOS systems to booking systems and so on, hospitality tech, but a lot of it actually is around how do you take friction out of the experience, the parts where it doesn't matter. So you don't want to be taking out from the front of house particularly, but anything that's friction, so payments, when you are, when you finish eating, I don't want to hang around waiting for the bill. When I'm ordering, I want it to be pretty slick and so on. So that part, it's all driven around sort of convenience, that whole aspect of things. Now, a lot of people are trying to do on the front end, and I think that's the part that you've got to be very careful with, because when you go to an experience, you want to go to a restaurant, what do you want to do? You want to have hospitality, you want to meet friends, you want to chat, you want to enjoy that experience. You don't want to have someone come up to you and start poking an iPad at you. I use a good example where there's a company called, anyone heard of Bergen Lobster and Goodman? Yeah, everyone knows that. They had a concept where Zellman Meats is in Soho. That was called Rex and Mariano before Zellman Meats came about. And that was a ceviche sort of site. It was great. I went in there with a friend of mine, and they were starting to use tech. They came up with this beautiful iPad with a menu, and spent 15 minutes explaining to us how to use the damn thing. Completely destroyed the experience. Really didn't give a shit about that, because at the end of the day, all we wanted to do was order, and a paper menu would have been fine. And the problem they forgot is that actually, when you're interacting like that, I'm not going to come back again. The whole point was for it to be efficient, but it created massive inefficiency because they didn't understand the human behavioral part. Now, I spend a lot of time looking at tech stuff, and I completely assume that the tech works. It boils down to actually what does the human behavioral part, how does that work? I'll give you another example where the tech has been a little bit better. And this is Bistro Pierre. My wife's family are in Somerset, and there was a Bistro Pierre there. And this waitress came up, and she had exactly the same thing, iPad, but it was all back of house. My son, who's 8, or 7, I should say, was really, really interested and was just fascinated about it. But we had paper menus. But he was actually really excited about it. The waitress actually was like, actually, I don't quite know how to use this. But sat down, stood next to my son, helped him sort of choose, and he poked it in, and it basically put the order into the back of the, into the kitchen. Now that's a much more effective way. So you're trying to create frictionless sort of service at the back of house, but you can use that tech to enhance the front of house experience, not the other way around. So that's a whole bunch of things there that, at the moment, there's a big gap. And that is the fact that when you go into any sort of restaurants and you see their till area or in the front of house area, they've probably got about 5 different iPads, because you've got Deliveroo, you've got Uber Eats, I went into Crush the other day in Bevis Market. We had a thing from Nez, we had a thing from Ritual, we had Deliveroo, we had Uber Eats. So it's like literally a whole tech city there. no one wants that. We want someone needs that, if you've got any entrepreneurs out there, come out and actually come up with something that aggregates everything in one system and sets out APIs for everyone else, you'll do well. A company tried to do that called Hypertables. Unfortunately, maybe too early, and they didn't raise the next round of funding, but there's a massive opportunity there. I think in the US there's someone trying to do that back of house, but front of house, there's a lot of things that ought to happen. Personalized food, that's my personal interest as well because of the health and wellness. Everyone knows that it's quite a big area. I love Foodini and so on. The guys there have been doing some really interesting things. The part I'm interested there is actually around aged care. So there's a couple of guys I'm doing things with where we're looking at aged care homes. How can you use technology, whether it's like a Foodini, to actually create products that are specific to you, that there's no waste, it's to your nutritional profile, that's going to help you. And there's stuff, when you mix that with voice ordering and Alexa and so on, some of the stuff that people have been talking about yesterday, that's happening. And there's a few people that are really sort of quite advanced with Amazon in this already. So watch this space because there's a lot of things going on there that will actually sort of will move to the mainstream. So while it starts off with aged care homes and so on, maybe even little kids, you and I will start having a lot more experience of this soon. And then the last part is what I call data-driven experiential sort of customer engagement, the things I was talking about around the competitive socializing, music and so on. So I'm involved with the business Ambi and Cheerify, but also that V up there is a company called PaveGen. One of the things that I'm quite keen to do is I'm working with the University of Surrey, and they're building a future hotel, a £35 million project that they're actually working at the moment, and I'm the guy that's helping them curate the food tech that's going in there. One of the cool things that we're trying to do is combine Ambi, which is the music tech for stores, PaveGen, which is a business that I invested in, that effectively is footfall technology. So you walk on these tiles, and when you walk on the tiles, it creates electricity. But the electricity then converts to data. So if you imagine that when you walk in here, if there's a mat well there, you walk in, it gets a sense of how many people in the room. If you then hook that up as data input into the music, you can change the mood of the place. So a bit like when you're driving a car, right? When you hit 100 miles an hour on the freeway, it's noisy outside, so your volume in your car stereo goes up. So you can do the same thing. So Drake and Morgan, one of the bar chains, Jillian has in her, they use Ambi, and actually the music will change on a Friday night, where as the night progresses, the upbeat, the tempo, and all that sort of stuff changes. Now imagine you can automate that with an input of something like PaveGen. That becomes pretty interesting, because what does that mean? Actually, if I come into a store, whether there's a Crush or a Pret or anything like that, I can increase the dwell time, I can increase the enjoyment factor there. I'm going to spend more as a customer, and I'm going to enjoy it more. I'm going to come back more. So you can start demonstrating and measuring that music will actually increase your spend, increase your sales. I guarantee you every CEO is going to be interested in that. Now, if you then take it to the next level, if you imagine a shopping center, a Westfield or something like that, if you imagine you had PaveGen types of things within the stores, that's one thing, but imagine in the communal areas, you're effectively having a heat map of where people are, or an airport terminal, airport sort of mall. You can start then really tracking sort of actually how do you encourage, again, dwell time, encourage sales and so on. Again, everyone starts getting very interested when you start closing that loop and creating a great experience. So all these things are really interesting, and a lot of it's also around that last part, around creating a community and tribe. So a lot of the businesses I'm looking at in this space, I'm looking for businesses that are, whether it's direct to consumer, that can understand the end customer. How are they going about creating a community, a tribe? So Jungle, as an example, Twisted, they've done an amazing job. So Twisted, the reason I'm interested in Lean Kitchen is because they have combined the fact that with a dark kitchen, you have trouble accessing your customers. They've actually managed to solve that by creating this channel where you're creating a demand pool, of a great Facebook channel, Twisted, all this YouTube sort of content that will drive customers and your community into the actual dark kitchen. So that part, that loop, is really important, because without that, you end up stranded. If you are on the supermarket shelves, you're stranded because you're at the mercy of the Sainsbury's or a Ricardo or whatever. If you're a bricks and mortar, you're also stranded because you're at the mercy of D2C and understanding the customers. So there's a lot in that space that I think we can be doing, and it's about understanding the whole experience. So I thought I'd leave that with you. That's the, I guess, a little view into, I guess, how I see the world. To some extent, it could be completely wrong, but at least it's a stab at it. Yeah, hope that's helpful. Cool.
Chris, no worries. If you can stay with us. Is there any question for Chris?
Yeah. Hello.
He's got one. Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. I'm Toshi, the founder of us. So basically, I'm running a company which does like a scheduled routine delivery service with digital native brand.
Yep.
So our cost per delivery is 10% compared to Deliveroo and Uber Eats. And I'm really wondering about the brick and mortar business, because currently, let's say Crush, $500,000 EBITDA, basically negative EBITDA, 2018. And Wasabi a 2 million, all of food brands that basically losing money.
Yep.
And negative EBITDA. And I want to know what's going to happen from your perspective, because technically, okay, now PE money shut down because they know they want to put money into FoodTech, and then they don't want to put money into a food traditional conventional brands. So what do you see the future of brick and mortar?
That's a very good question. That's part of the reason why I've stepped out of bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
You can see that happening, basically, right? and so, yeah, very good question. So PE, interesting. So Capdesia have just invested in Wasabi.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, a week ago with Sushiro Global, which is Japanese sushi company.
And Ashton's going to be, I think, talking tomorrow actually. But the investment thesis there is quite interesting, because I think there is a recognition that bricks and mortar is constrained, I should say, right? And it's going to need a whole reimagining. And I'm only interested in bricks and mortar now if they really understand the whole spectrum of things of how do you, like I say, how do you build a community? How do you build an understanding of the relative different things? So Crush, as an example, Shane is a current CEO. He's now moving it so that we're going through Sainsbury's and going through concessions and all that sort of stuff, which is going to, so at the moment, negative EBITDA. It's been pretty ugly for the guys the last year or so, but that's going to start sort of picking, because they're trying to create a different sort of movement in terms of their choice of things. It's not necessarily a tech route in that particular case, but it's actually expanding that sort of that strategy across multi-channel, which is effectively the same thing. Today, I don't know if you saw the news that Jamie Oliver Restaurants has just gone bust. That part is really, really difficult, because unless you're able to work out how you actually sort of balance the fact that you're not going to have the same amount of footfall, it's going to be difficult. Because what's happened on the high street, partly something I said last night at the Swedish event, is that what's happened is that previous recessions, if you understand the sort of property market, you have traditionally there's something called A1 retail. So you do fashion, you do all the electronic goods and so on. Recession comes, those guys are the first one to go out. And what happens is food stays in, and actually in previous recessions, that's when the large coffee chains, they built, because they were able to sweep up all the different properties.
Do you know when? When was the previous recession?
No, we're talking about before 2007, 2008.
Okay. Oh, you mean talking
about previous to that? Okay. And what's happened is that as the economy picks up, all these other guys come back in. What happened 2007, 8, 2009? Something fundamentally structurally changed, but the rest of the world didn't really understand that, because we all thought it was part of this global financial crisis. But what's happened actually is that all those guys moved out, the fashion guys, the electronics and so on, and no one came in. So food came in, as it were, but when things picked up, only stayed as food. So you've gone from a situation where you had 7 non-food, 3 food on the high street as an example, switching the other way around. You have 7 food and 3 non-food. Creates a lot of problems. More than double the competition on the food side. Less of a reason to visit the high street as well. So you're hollowing out the high street. That's why all this stuff is effectively, it's sort of predictable what's happening. And it's only going to continue to get worse. So there's always going to be space for bricks and mortar, but it's going to be different. And you don't need, we used to look at it every 200 meter radius. That's what we cared about, because then you can open a store. I go back to sort of when I was at Bain. you know, they were the guys helping Starbucks 10, 15 years ago do the analysis, understanding actually why do you want to, why that you can actually open a Starbucks on one side of the road and one on the other side of the road. If you remember back then, all of a sudden they started ballooning because the analysis back then was that people could be asked crossing the road. And you could literally do that. Now that's changed because of all this direct-to-consumer, all this delivery stuff. So now, instead of a 200-meter radius, you might have a 2-mile radius because actually you're sitting in the office, you've got delivery services coming in, you might do a Graze.com one day, all sorts of things. So it's fundamentally changed. So yeah, it's ugly out there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Does that answer the question?
Sort of.
Hi, Rob Ward.
Hi, Rob.
See.
Hey.
So there's some amazing examples of investment opportunities that happen through B2C, like Grace or Harry's is another one.
Yeah.
Look at FMCG total market. And then you look at retail and so they've been where it's all going and the fragmentation that's happening there. What are your thoughts on how big is D2C going to get compared to conventional retail? I mean, looking at the numbers, it's still tiny actually in real terms. But
think of internet shopping 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. So
think of it now.
So
we started switching over from bricks and mortar sort of retail. I think that tipping point of over 50% from Black Friday or whatever has come. It's no different. Think about when you go to a supermarket and look at the self-checkout. When it first came out, the checkout person was always going to be there. You couldn't imagine that you'll have this automated self-checkout.
It's still annoying though, isn't it?
Yeah, but the thing is, you go to certain places now. There's like one person doing on actually one physical person, and there's like 30, sort of self-checkouts. So
I'm with you, but actually, it's only 6% of our food is sold online right now. I mean, there's a lot of other things sold online, but actually, of food retail market is about 6% of the total market, which of course means 1% more than that is another huge leap. Another huge leap. But there's a long way to go, and I think that's I don't know. I'm really up for it. I mean, but in London we can get totally surrounded by all this and think this is.
So here's an interesting thing. So past evangelists, okay, they were pretty much only London for letterbox, pasta, high-end pasta through your letterbox.
All right.
And we have a price point of like 9 to 11 pounds or so, right? Which is pretty expensive, if you're eating sort of daily, right? So we figured, the assumption, the hypothesis is that London's obviously the right place, certain neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. Then, several months ago, they opened it up to nationwide distribution so that you could order it, so on. I was down in the kitchen with the guys, and I was like, ooh, this, and they started using a DVD for that, and that's gone really, really well. Then I saw like 7 boxes there that were Royal Mail. I was like, what's that? And then the guys say, well, that goes out to the rest of UK that you can't get to. So I was like, Outer Hebrides and things like that, Channel Islands, places like that. There are 7 boxes going out there. Now, the interesting thing there is that I've asked the guys to do some data, try to get some data on it over time. My hypothesis of that is that actually, if you're in London, what you're doing is you're substituting a cooked meal that you cook yourself, right, for this £9 sort of lazy offering that I've got to heat up in 3 minutes, and 3 minutes off. But even though it's relatively wealthy in London, it seems expensive, right? So actually, the comments are in London it feels expensive. What we're seeing outside of the country, the rest of the country, people are buying it, but they're buying it less frequently. So if you're in London, you might get on board, you buy it, and you churn off very quickly because you think it's great, and then you get bored and you find the next sexy thing out there. If you're out in the sticks somewhere, you don't have a choice. So what's happening is that people are ordering it on a regular basis. Maybe it's just once a month, but they're doing it every month. And what it is doing is not substituting a cooked meal that they cook themselves. It's substituting going out to the local Indian or the pub or whatever. And therefore, 9 to 12 pounds is actually not that expensive. So that's interesting. So if you imagine as we develop in cities, develop all this sort of stuff goes on, driverless cars, blah, 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 you don't need to necessarily live in the city, right? You can live in the countryside, and now, it used to be mail order. That's what it is. Now you've got Amazon. It's the same thing. So yeah, I think it will change.
Naturally.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you see more potential outside London or like for the Los Angeles? Do you think?
I don't know. I mean,
You don't know.
it's too early to, but I see that there's
That was-
that's massive opportunity.
Of course.
Yeah, and it was very interesting. It sort of vindicated a number of thoughts I had.
Because I never thought about it. It was quite interesting actually.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I know. One of the things that I wanted to do with Crush was around taking something out to Sheffield as an example. It'd be difficult to open a store and guarantee 500 people in the city centre. But I can guarantee you that there's plenty of people that would take a subscription box of stuff, whether they're celiacs or vegetarian or vegan, and that becomes very sticky as well.
yeah. You may not be able to disclose, but like, what's the typical customer of like Londoner? Let's say like how long does it take to churn off? Let's say in London. Of course you can't probably, but if
I don't know exactly.
You don't know.
It's not I can't. I just don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not close enough to the business
Okay, that's
in that
good.
respect
Yeah.
to be able to say that.
Yeah.
So, but gut-wise, from conversations, there's to me there's a reasonable. There's always going to be reasonable churn.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.